I have a problem, and I'll be the first to admit it. I currently own several cars, so many I've lost count, and the number keeps growing. I'm running out of places to keep them, so I just park them out in this field and promise myself I'll get them to inside storage soon. But the cars aren't the real issue here. While I have a lot of them, I have several more login and password combinations that are impossible to memorize and keep secure. That was until I got LastPass, who is sponsoring this portion of the video. Before LastPass, I would buy a new project car almost every month just to store my new online account credentials. It's why my projects continually got larger and larger, but this method proved to be unsustainable.
LastPass is the internet's best password manager that keeps your online life organized and secure. Once you download LastPass, you'll never ever have to click Lost My Password again.
Retrieve your password by answering the security question below. Well, seems simple enough. Please enter your third grade teacher's favorite sports team athlete's wife's maiden name? What? LastPass retains and automatically fills in all your account credentials across your desktop and mobile platforms, saving you a ton of time and sanity. It installs in literally a few clicks or taps, has unlimited password storage, and has an awesome password generator that will create you a secure password and save it into your LastPass vault all within seconds.
Quite possibly the best part, LastPass is free, and LastPass Premium, which adds a slew of helpful features like encrypted file storage, starts at only $3 a month. So add a level of security and sanity to your online life. Download LastPass simply by clicking my link in the description box below. And of course, I gotta give a huge thanks to LastPass for sponsoring this portion of the video.
This is my 800 horsepower Audi RS7. It's a big, beautiful sports sedan that's supercar fast and it makes all the right noises. The RS7 doesn't do it for you, how about the British racing green Ferrari 360 Spider? Sure, it's in a million pieces in the barn, and it hasn't worked right since day one. It's unforgiving, unrefined, ungodly expensive to maintain, but when it's moving under its own power and you're in the driver's seat, it's an experience to behold. Now, it's obvious I'm enthusiastic about cars, and if you're watching this, you probably are as well. I always thought there's a car out there for everyone. That is, until I met my wife. The only time my wife has ever been excited about a car is when her Lincoln, a car I bought as a previous manufacturer buyback branded with a lemon title for electrical issues, broke down in the busiest intersection in our town. And then it was more the physics definition of excited. A few years ago, when we were on vacation in North Carolina, we spotted a tiny, vintage European-looking car, blue with a white roof in a shopping center parking lot. I took a single glance, thought it was cool, but my wife actually stopped to get a closer look at the car, take a picture, and she asked me immediately, "What is this?" I honestly hadn't a clue, so I got out of our car, I walked up to this one, and in very small font on its hood emblem said Nissan Figaro. I hopped back in our car, Googled Nissan Figaro, and was quickly wowed by this car's backstory.
The Figaro was only produced in 1 year, and that was 1991. Nissan had an initial run of 8,000 cars, which sold out almost immediately. The consumers demanded more Figaros, and so they produced an additional 12,000. However, you had to enter a lottery just to get the rights to purchase one. I mean, the car looks incredible, has timeless styling, an incredible following, and it finally got my wife interested in cars, something I never thought I could do. So I figured I had to purchase her one. That is until I went online and saw how much they were asking for these cars here in the United States.
A perfect example on eBay listed for over $20,000. A few decently sorted cars were over $10,000, and there were a handful of cars that needed restoring between $6,000 and $9,000. Now, I'm always looking for an excuse to buy a car, and usually the excuse is that they're too cheap to pass up, but I have a hard time justifying 5 figures on an old car simply because my wife liked it. The idea of buying a Figaro very quickly solidified itself as simply an idea. About a year later, I visited my friend Freddie, and you might know him better as Tavarish. Inside his garage is a collection of cars with history. There's a Lexus with 1,000,000 miles on it, a former SCCA championship winning Camaro race car, and a Lamborghini that was screen used in the Fast and the Furious movie franchise. But the one that stood out to me, it's the one that's been hiding in the back under a car cover. No, it's not a Figaro. It's not even a Nissan, and I don't want to spoil Freddie's surprise, but this was a car he bought overseas and imported into the country. He told me about a site where he bought this car and how cheap it was. When I got home from Freddie's garage, Garage, the first thing I did was hop on my laptop, went to this site to see if I could find a cheap Figaro. Up popped up a handful of Figaros, all in the very similar price range to the ones I had previously found, but right down at the bottom was one for $2,153. I scanned through the photos and they looked pretty decent. The car was in far from perfect shape, with what looked like a pretty worn out interior and a few little rust spots on the quarter panel, but it was a fraction of the price of all the other Figaros I had found, either inside or out of the United States. Among the photos was this right here. Written in all Japanese, I wasn't quite sure what it was or what it said, but after a little research, I found out it was an auction scorecard. This site actually facilitated the purchase of cars from the Japanese auto auctions, which makes this story even better since I personally love buying cars from American auctions. Now, the auction scorecard graded this Figaro at a 3.5, which is really strange. It's a 1 through 5 scale, and a 3.5 basically means it's in average condition given its mileage, which is pretty high at over 200,000 kilometers. Since the Figaro was only produced in 1991, it makes all of these cars fairly old, and most of them seem to have been reconditioned in one way or another. Because of their reconditioning, pretty much every other Figaro I've seen with one of these auction scorecards comes with an R grade, which stands for rebuilt. While the R grade doesn't always mean the car was in an accident and repaired, there's no way of really telling what was rebuilt or reconditioned unless you give the car an in-person inspection. While I'm no stranger to rebuilt cars, it always comes down to how well a car is rebuilt. And since I'm buying sight unseen in another country, I'd rather take the gamble on a car that seems mostly original versus a car that's been rebuilt by an unknown. Even though shipping to the nearest port added $1,000 to the bill, I clicked the Buy It Now button as if I were buying an SD card off of Amazon.
But unlike Amazon, who delivers your packages in 2 days, the delivery process of this car from overseas can take upwards of 2 whole months. And when you click that Buy Now button, all you're really doing is committing to buy the car. You don't actually own the car until you wire that money to the auction company, and they give you 1 business day to make that wire transfer happen. Lucky for me, I clicked that Buy Now button on a Friday afternoon, which means I had the whole entire weekend to really mull over the idea of buying another project car. Sure, I'm telling you that I'm buying this car for my wife, and I really am, but I know that it's a project that will fall back into my lap very quickly. Now, just a couple hours after clicking that Buy Now button, someone very close to me, a family member, was rushed to the hospital. The great news here is that my family member positively progressed immediately after being admitted to the hospital and was discharged only about a week later. Things went absolutely perfect. Now, spending the entire weekend in the hospital, I had pretty much forgotten that I had committed to buy this Figaro. It wasn't until we got home on Sunday evening, my wife was on the phone with a family member giving a hospital status update to them, and I heard her say, and I pretty much quote, she says, "I sometimes joke with Sam that he should buy me one of those Nissan Figaros in a blue color." And I swear to you, we haven't brought up nor talked about a Nissan Figaro in over a year at this point. I thought this was something in the past that she had completely forgotten about, but no, she obviously was serious in wanting one of these cars. So I immediately hopped on the computer. I initiated the wire transfer, a little bit over $3,000, and made the deal on the Nissan Figaro official.
Almost exactly 2 months later, I had gotten an email letting me know that the Figaro was delivered to the Jacksonville port here in Florida and was ready to be picked up. In order to actually retrieve your car off the port, you have to hire an escort service. No, not that sort of escort service, a port escort service. Basically, you need someone with credentials to get onto the shipping port to help you retrieve your car. Now, I've never heard of a free escort service, and this one wasn't super cheap either. And as far as I could tell, it's the only one in town. They charged $100, which is good for 30 minutes. That'll get you on and off the port, but if there's any issues whatsoever with your car, after that first 30 minutes, you get billed every subsequent 30 minutes. When I got to the escort's office, I was asked, "Do you have your yellow safety vest?" In which I replied, "No, am I supposed to have a yellow safety vest?" And she replied, "Yes, everybody who's on the port needs to be wearing a yellow safety vest. No worries, we've got one here for you. It'll only cost $10. Now, with the total of $110 to the escort service, the nickel and diming session was complete, and I just had to sign one form that committed me to not taking any video or any photos while on the port. This is slightly disappointing because I really wished I could have shared this part with you, but I understand why they want privacy here. Once you drive up to the port, it's kind of like the entrance to Disney World, and once you get past the gates, there are parking lots just like Disney World, but they're full of brand new cars. Every make and model you can imagine, they're there, and they're all wrapped up in that brand new plastic. I was taken to a specific lot with a bunch of used right-hand drive cars from Japan. In the row the Figaro was in was like a JDM fanboy's dream. dream. Right up front were 2 right-hand drive Supras, and down the line I counted at least 4 early 90s Nissan Skyline GTRs. My Figaro was the only Figaro in the line of about 25 to 30 cars, and they told me I could just simply walk up to it and drive it to my truck. Now this is where I got a little nervous. At the auctions they have forklifts to load cars that won't run or drive, and I figured that this car came all the way from Japan. I bought it 2 months ago. There's no way it's gonna start. And even though I had brought my battery box and tire inflator, I was dead wrong. This car started right up, and I drove it right up the trailer. I was literally at the port for only about 15 minutes. Once I exited the port, I stopped once to fuel up and then headed home.
Fresh off the boat, now fresh off the trailer, and the Figaro looks just as it did in the auction listings. I really got to give a lot of credit to whoever writes these auction reports up. They're very honest. We see the same rust that we saw in the photos. We do see that the top has seen better days. This might be the original top and even possibly the original paint when this car was produced in 1991. I know I'm having a hard time believing that, but if this car was garage kept, but also utilized a lot with over 200,000 kilometers, it would make sense because overall we have some damage, like a little ding right here in the rear quarter, and again the rust that we saw in the photos, but all around that rust. Listen, that is all metal. There is no body filler anywhere. So the exterior condition on this Figaro with just a little bit of body work and paint could be excellent. It did rain on the ride home and there's no water inside, even though we do have these small tears here. So this is still watertight, although it would be really nice if this was replaced. And then this is also metal right here. This is painted white and it's faded pretty good in the front area here. Again, why I think this actually might be this car's original paint.
Well, that all just might have looked like some fancy old retro vinyl top. The Figaro is actually a fixed roof convertible, which makes it that much cooler. And it's manually operated, so I'd imagine it all still works just fine as opposed to any old car I've ever bought with a power convertible top. I love how well thought out these old Japanese cars are. You see that little white handle, obviously so you don't crush your hand in the folding top frame. Here's simplistic engineering at its finest. It's just secured in place with some clips that you had on your grade school backpack. Close the trunk lid, and it was in the trunk, but there's a little beauty cover that just snaps into place here on the rear seats. Unfortunately, this is something I didn't see in the photos. Our rear seat has a nice tear up top here, so add this to the list of things that need refurbishing.
Now the interior is what is in need of the most help. The driver's seat here is pretty worn and torn. Passenger's seat, well, it's not as bad, but definitely needs to be reconditioned. And the dashboard has several cracks in it. But just look at the interior in this car. Look at the styling. This is definitely one of those timeless interiors with awesome details. Look at the up and down window switches. They're in the shape of the Figaro emblem, which looks like a tiny little seashell. And all of these switches, they all still flick up and feel solid as the day the car was produced. But check these two switches out. This is obviously a defroster switch. Flick it on, flick it off. Right here though, I had no clue what this does. This is a switch that returns to the center. So you can flick it up or down and it always returns to the center. And I looked outside of the car and checked this out. It's for the antenna. I'm holding the switch up and the antenna pops out. And now I'm pushing the switch down and the antenna retracts. If I stop midway, the antenna stops. Now that's something I've never seen before. Now this was shown in the auction photos. We've got a missing glove box cover here and an aftermarket radio. The Figaro purists want their factory Figaro radios because they match the interior perfectly. However, a lot of these get swapped out. And I am really excited to tell you though that this right here, this missing glove box cover was not missing. It was just sitting in the back seat, although it is damaged. So hopefully we'll be able to figure out a way to attach this back in place and make the dashboard look complete again. Even considering its cosmetic issues, I think we're off to a great start. So what I want to do right now is pop that hood, check the dipstick, make sure we got a little bit of oil in the engine. As long as we do and nothing looks strange, we're going to take the Figaro on a test drive, and the mechanics of this car will ultimately dictate whether we got a good deal and a good car. looks like we're good to go. Still amazed at how good this starts up. This is a cold start, and it just cranks right over. And it idles pretty good, but you will notice the steering wheel is shaking a good amount here. As you see, that shaking goes away pretty quick. We probably got a worn out pulley, maybe some worn out engine or trans mounts. But once we get on the road, it should tell us a little bit more about the condition of this car mechanically. Now, the Figaro is powered by a 1-liter turbocharged engine that produces 75 horsepower, which isn't too bad considering this car weighs under 1,800 pounds. It gets up to speed in traffic just fine, but I've never driven a Figaro before, so I'll definitely want to just inspect the turbocharger, make sure it's functioning properly. They are known to wear out on these cars, and if it is worn out, then it wouldn't be producing any boost and it would actually be slower. But I don't think there's any issue with it. Now, to get this car going from a stop, you really got to kind of bury the throttle. And you feel a little bit of turbo lag, and it gets up to speed quite nicely. Remember, this is in kilometers per hour, but as we get up to speed, we're exposing one clear mechanical issue. You hear that noise coming out of the passenger side? Well, you can really hear the pitch of that noise change as I increase or decrease speeds, which definitely tells me it has something to do with the front corner suspension over here. Likely something that's causing a noise when the axle is rotating. So it could be something in the wheel tire area, maybe the hub, or it could be in the axle itself mating into the transmission. There's only one other mechanical issue I can find with this car, and that's that when you take a turn, there is a substantial amount of body roll, which tells me this Figaro is on its original over 200,000 kilometer suspension. A new set of dampers should firm things up quite a bit, and they wouldn't cost all that much. So it's something I definitely plan on doing to this car. What I'm really amazed by is just how well everything works. Like I told you, we've got cold air conditioning. All of the switches and buttons work. I've checked the brake lights and turn signals. They all work. Every single switch has a purpose, and it works. Right here, I've got an automatic power driver window that still works. The passenger window goes up and down just fine as well. This car is really a testament to old Japanese reliability. To inspect our turbo should be really easy. This pipe connects from the air intake to the turbocharger, which is just right here. It is bolted in with 2 screws, and they're both Phillips head. I've already loosened this one and the one down there. There's also one little clamp that I want to loosen up right here. And as simple as that, there is the inside of our turbocharger. If I reach my finger in there and just touch the center of the shaft, there is no play whatsoever, and I'm turning the turbine a little bit by hand here, and it spins freely and smoothly. Upon first glance, I'd say that our turbocharger is acting just the way it should, and I don't see any other issues up top in the engine base. I am very pleasantly surprised at the condition of everything down here. No rust on the front frame, a few little weep areas where there's some slight grime, but I don't see any major active leaks, which is really good. And what I'm noticing that's even better than under this area is that there's no major rust on our rocker panels. I suspected that there'd be a ton of rust underneath here, even though it didn't look like it in the online photos, just because these rockers are usually the first thing to rust out. These are about as solid as it gets. Passenger side is really good as well, except this one little spot down here. I'd say this is about 6 inches in length. And again, considering that rocker panels are the first to go, and all around this is all solid metal. It hasn't been bondoed up and it's rusting through the bondo. This is one little area you could patch, and then your rockers would be perfect.
Now, to try and find that nasty noise we had while we were driving the car, I put the car up on jack stands and I spun the passenger side tire and also wiggled it around. There's no play, and I don't think I was spinning it fast enough to replicate this noise. So while the front end was raised, I started the car up and put it in gear. The driver's side is the longer axle shaft on this car, and it seemed to be spinning pretty normally. But when you look where the joint meets the transmission on the passenger passenger side, you could see as it makes a rotation, it's lopsided. There should be no slop in this whatsoever. It should just turn smoothly, so that's clearly where our issue is. Now, the best way to fix something like this is to get a completely new axle, and by the looks of it, this looks like an axle that'll be very simple to install. It should come in and out in less than an hour.
While our Figaro is far from perfect, I think that it's the perfect DIY restoration car for a number of reasons. First off, we got it for a great deal. Second off, it's so simply built that all those suspension components that need replacing and any of the general maintenance or wear items that this car needs are so easy to repair, and the parts are readily available. I think about 5 to 6 hours over a weekend, and probably about $500 to $600, and we'll have a mechanically sound car. Body and paint work can be costly at a professional collision shop, but the body of this car is so small and those rust spots are really well contained. I would try and work on this in my home garage. I think that I and a friend could get it prepped for paint in just a couple days. I'd imagine paint and supplies on a car this size would run between $200 and $300, and if you so wanted to, while you're at it, you could change the color. Now, not everything can be super cheap and easy, and the convertible top and the interior are where you could easily spend several $1,000s. If you wanted to restore this car like it came from the factory and get the same materials and the same colors and the same styles, the dashboard, the seats, and the convertible top could easily run you upwards of $5,000, maybe $6,000 to restore at a custom upholstery shop. Now, if you've been awaiting the part where I drive the Figaro down the driveway with a gigantic bow on the hood, pull the keys from the ignition, hand them to my wife, and surprise her with her new but very used Nissan Figaro, well, I'm sorry, that's just not my style. You see, the surprise was within this video the entire time. My wife is subscribed with notifications turned on, and I'm lucky to say she watches every single one of these videos. And I think it means way more that I was able to share the surprise with all of you at the same time. Because if it wasn't for you watching, well, I wouldn't be doing things like buying a Nissan Figaro from a Japanese auto auction completely sight unseen. So with that, I want to thank each and every one of you for watching today, and I'll catch you very soon.